one big lesson was what I mentioned is like building a chain and autonomous agent gets in each other's way, because an autonomous agent cannot fully run on the chain. If that was so, if it's just a set of smart contracts, I'm actually surprised. Obviously I didn't expect it, so from that pure kind of factor. Also in the past, has any merger worked in crypto? The problem is, we notice, even with the best intention, if the structure isn't there, people get corrupted, everyone. You cannot build an entity which ultimately controls like entire like GDP size economies worth of wealth, potentially more, and tell me that you're going to like just sort of govern that well when we just seen like, I mean, we've seen in November, they can't even govern like the most basic setup, right? Yeah, the more big players we can have who are competing both in the closed and open space is important. I think the way it's currently defined is that you effectively have artificial intelligence system which is as capable as a human across many domains, if not all, rather than specific domains. So, you know, we already have like systems which are much better than humans on like narrow levels of intelligence.
Hello à tous l'équipe, j'espère que vous allez bien. Aujourd'hui on se retrouve pour une nouvelle vidéo, une nouvelle interview. Cette fois-ci j'ai le plaisir de recevoir David Minarche, qui est un des membres fondateurs de autonomes, qui est un réseau décentralisé incluant de l'IA et qui a une approche assez intéressante et différente des autres projets IA qu'on peut voir jusqu'à maintenant. Donc je me suis dit que ça pourrait être assez pertinent de parler avec cette personne pour vous promouvoir un petit peu davantage d'IA ici, parce qu'on n'a pas énormément parlé d'IA jusqu'à maintenant sur ma chaîne, et surtout vous présenter techniquement comment ça fonctionne, comment on inclut l'IA sur la blockchain, quel sera le rôle de l'IA sur la blockchain, est-ce que certains projets sont bullshit actuellement, est-ce que d'autres sont peut-être plus pertinents. Donc voilà, ça va être l'occasion de discuter de tout ça. Hello David, how is it going?
Hey, yeah, it's going well. Thanks for having me.
I mean, thank you for accepting this interview. I'm very glad to have you. I think like a couple of people mentioned autonomes like on social medias whenever I was chatting about like AI projects and everything. And one common friend told me that you were probably open to do it. So I'm very glad to have you. And also in doing it like in a very short delay is very appreciated. So today I wanted to chat a bit about autonomes, about Valerie, about your perspectives on the market when it comes to crypto, blockchain, AI, and also understand what's relevant, what's not, and understand, like I would say, the specificities of autonomes. So maybe before starting and talking about it, could you introduce yourself very quickly and maybe explain your background? Because I do believe that you have like a very interesting background that is linked to the Web2 and Web3 ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm David, co-founder and CEO of Valerie co-contributor to OLAS or autonomes. And we, as Valerie, also the kind of founder or launcher of the network. There's around 50 founding members. I'm also one of them. And to my background, so I did a PhD in economics, specifically applied game theory. Did a lot of like studying of games on networks, as it's called. And then kind of at some point arrived at this crypto AI intersection. Happy to kind of talk more about this journey, but to keep it brief, what motivated me there is that sort of you have this game theory aspect to it, the economics aspect to it. You have the open permissionless networks where you can sort of build these entirely new structures on top. And then I was always interested in the AI side of things, and actually and already during my PhD, I had sort of increasingly worked on data science and then increasingly machine learning. And so that really neatly merged in 2019. Initially, joined Fetch.ai, built up their autonomous agent framework, and then left in 2021 and co-founded Valerie. And OLAS was launched in stages, but the stack sort of in the community in late 2021. And then we've been building since.
And so whenever you started to work on like AI, like how has things like changed, like and evolved since like you started working on AI compared to today? Because like things are moving very quickly now.
Very quickly.
Yeah. So how did it change in a way, like from your perspective, from the industry perspective and everything?
Yeah. I mean, I think like the highest level change is like you have this sort of generative AI now where most like directly the impact that has on the things we're doing is that, you know, when previously we're building agents. So agents, autonomous agents are a subset of AI in a sense. But historically, if you were to use other kind of AI models as part of your agent, you would tend to have to kind of pre-select as the developer the model and kind of tune it to a specific use case. So for instance, if you have a trading bot, then you maybe have like some very specific model which does well there. There wasn't like some sort of general purpose technology to kind of incorporate in your agents. And with the arrival of large language models, this is now changing. So it becomes much easier to build sort of end-to-end autonomous agent systems, which are much more open-ended in the kind of things they can do, right? So where there's much less rules-based logic in there around the kind of models which are being selected. It can much more dynamically select the kind of actions and the kind of models it's going to use. So that's like one big shift. And then obviously within this kind of field of generative AI, like everything is moving like incredibly fast, and it's very hard to even like keep up. And you know, there's foundational progress, but then there's also like all these huge challenges which are emerging, which we can talk about, where, you know, autonomous has some answers there, very structurally. So I think that's a big change. But then more generally, if you think about sort of autonomous agents, and that's what we're building, I should maybe quickly define what that even is. It's like basically a software system which takes input from its environment. So that can be other APIs, other data sources, sensors, whatever. It then has some internal state and internal logic to kind of deal with this. And then it ultimately takes actions, which can be, again, like in the digital domain, most commonly like sending transactions, calling APIs, whatever. Or it can be ultimately also like outside in the physical. So these kind of autonomous agents have been built for like a long time, but there were always sort of blockers to it. So like there's this whole subfield of multi-agent system, which is a subfield of AI, and this field had sort of renaissances and then winters again and so on. And I think the biggest two unlocks for the potential of autonomous agents happened in the last sort of 10 years. One is smart contract chains. So what they do when they're permissionless is that they, you know, provide like rails on which agents can very easily interact with each other, transact, create contracts and so on, like we humans do, but obviously much more efficiently. They also, you know, create this whole composability for agents to kind of be combined and interacting with each other. There's a couple other benefits we can touch on later. So that was the first big thing, like these smart contract chains. And then I think the second big thing was these large language models, for the aforementioned reason that they just kind of break open the kind of design space and make it possible to build much, much more capable agents. So I think we're at a stage where autonomous agents finally hitting their strides, and Ola's certainly kind of seeing that on a daily basis.
When you're mentioning like autonomous agents, like it's like basically you have a goal, and basically this agent helps you to reach it without explaining like all the details and all the steps he has to follow. Like I would say, so basically it would not be the same as like OpenAI and ChatGPT, like in its current version, where you ask like, okay, do that, and then it gives you like a simple answer because you gave him like a simple task. Then it would be like something that is more advanced, and then like the agent would decide about like the smaller tasks to achieve by himself to achieve this global goal. Is it right? Like, and is any consumer-facing solutions available that leverage like those autonomous agents?
Yeah, a lot of correct points made. So, like the big, I think, change in terms of UX, you kind of touched on it. I want to make it very clear. It's like if you think about historically, like a lot of products would be around viewing, right? Like so, websites, books. Like you're the consumer, but the content is static. And then there were these mobile applications in the digital domain where, and the web applications where it's all about interacting. So social networks, great example, you're kind of writing and reading, right? You're kind of creating the content and you're consuming it. And then obviously we have sort of Web3 where, you know, you have like this owning of content. But now in terms of when we think about agents, there's also a different type of UX possible, which is like rather than interacting with your content and writing and reading, and you can basically have the system create outcomes for you. So rather than you being there and instructing it all along, like you would do when you book a flight or when you kind of use ChatGPT. You're like there and you're instructing the system all along. Like you'll write a prompt and then get a response, and then you write the next prompt and get a response, right? The idea with an autonomous agent is that you have some higher level goal, as you said, which could be as simple as I want to make money, or I want to basically maybe learn how I can be healthier in some domain or something like this. Very, very high level goals. And then you can sort of hand that off to an agent. And the idea is that then the agent kind of autonomously, i.e. on its own accord, executes against this goal for you, right? And so a great example, which we have live, touching on use cases, is like in the sense of prediction markets. So there's different types of agents there. And you as an end user, you can own one of them. And then what the agent does is sort of participates on your behalf in these prediction markets. And effectively, its goal is just to, in this case, make you money. So, but the way it does it is it kind of participates in these markets by taking positions in them and trading with other agents on information and so on. Now, I think more generally, this space of outcomes products, as I would call it, like is huge, right? So, and we are only at the very beginning of that transition into that kind of phase of UX. I think we will get used to products where they're effectively autonomous agents, but like the product will be called whatever, like will have some name, and you're kind of just used to that it kind of delivers these useful things for you. So maybe quite soon, rather than you having to go and sort of book your holiday in all its detail, you would sort of outsource that to the system. Or maybe rather than you hiring like a certain employee for like a certain domain in your business, you might outsource that to an autonomous agent which you own, which does that for you, right? And which integrates like an employee into your organization.
Cette vidéo vous est présentée en partenariat avec dYdX. dYdX est la solution décentralisée qui vous permet de trader les principales crypto-monnaies de manière liquide sur mobile et ordinateur. Contrairement à la majorité des exchanges, vous n'avez pas besoin de vous KYC et vous récupérez la majorité des frais que vous payez. Plus de 60 000 personnes utilisent déjà dYdX et j'en fais partie, alors qu'attendez-vous? Scannez le QR code sur votre écran ou utilisez le lien dans la description pour créer votre compte avec un simple wallet et profitez de 5% de réduction sur vos frais. Allez, on repart sur l'interview. How transparent is like the thinking and completing process of those autonomous agents? Because you mentioned that it does things for you and it thinks for you to reach, for example, like a high level goal, as you mentioned. But can you see from like a user perspective, all the thoughts and all the process he went through to accomplish this ultimate goal? Or is it like something that is quite opaque? Because you mentioned that basically with Autonolas, you have like a decentralized networks that includes basically autonomous agents that you could own and run and make probably money from it. But like, how transparent is it? And also so far, like what kind of like results did you did you get from those experiments?
Yeah, that's exactly the right, in my opinion, kind of consideration. Like ultimately, when we're having these systems which become increasingly powerful and do things on our behalf, the question is, do I actually own the system? Is it a system I can rely on? Like, what does it actually do? Now, it's maybe not so important that every single step you actually look at. It's more like that in principle, you have the opportunity to do that, right? And so one big concern is obviously as these AI systems become increasingly agentic, right? Like I didn't explicitly say that before, but like in this AI development push, we're going from like rules-based, which was a long time ago, to learning, which, this is the way these models are trained, to now then becoming agentic and continuously learning. And really, it's very clear that when we're talking about things like AGI and other kind of like advanced AI systems, that they're increasingly agentic. And so it's really, really important that we think about like how can we make them transparent, less biased, like actually follow our instructions, be aligned with our intent, but also how can we like just own them? Because ultimately, if there's more and more of these systems, right, like they will generate a lot of economic wealth. And
they'll be valuable.
Yeah. I mean, it's very obvious that if I have an employee which I synthesize, then I want to potentially be owning this, and I don't want to pay rent to someone else all the time. So I think there, Autonomous isn't alone. There's now an entirely emerging decentralized AI space, right, with a lot of projects, some of them good, some of them just, riding on the coattails of others. But basically, it's important to own these systems. And so this starts from like the data, right, like the models and algorithms, and then also kind of the assets which they're generating and using to generate their results and so on. So in the autonomous sense, the way this is achieved is that effectively we have this concept of the autonomous agent, which can either be fully owned by you as the end user. So an example is one of those agents participating in Ola's the prediction markets. You can outright own one of those agents and run it inside the Ola's network, like it will connect to other agents, trade with them. But your own agents, you will always own. You can do it right away. You can go to operate.olas.network and actually do that. And that's also a mode Olas enables, is where you can co-own them. So for instance, Olas has like other kinds of agents where there's multiple nodes which make up the agents. So it looks a bit like a blockchain, but that's just like an analogy in a sense. And then you can sort of own one of those nodes, and the agent is the collective whole. Now, in terms of like the traction we have with this, we're just like very close now to the first 500,000 transactions. So we have done around 12% of all safe transactions on Gnosis ever. Safe is this multisig, which is kind of
not
under
bad.
the hood. Yeah, not bad. So there is some really decent traction there. But obviously, like, I mean, that's a great number we have. I think, we see ultimately like autonomous agents, not just from Olas, but like more generally, to count in a number of billions and then like trillions. I mean, they'll far exceed the number of humans we have, because what I think will happen is that we'll have like entire economies which are effectively made up of these synthetic beings.
And so what question I had is that, so basically you also leverage centralized solution such as like OpenAI and ChatGPT like API. I guess there are maybe others that you can mention. And so you mentioned before that it is important that we have like kind of like a track record. We could have like some transparency and everything. And like, I would say avoid like any strong bias. Like, is it something that we could like truly avoid if we have like a centralized component that we cannot really control or like I would say monitor?
So let me see if I get your question right. So in terms of like, why do we use centralized parts right now? It's like a lot of it is pragmatism, right? So we want to move fast towards the end state, which is we want
a lot of them are good.
Huh?
A lot of them are good.
Exactly. A lot of them are like significantly better than open models. But we'll come back to this topic because there's a lot of things to be said there as well. But generally speaking, even when you use centralized models, it's not necessarily a problem if you can own the system. So, if all you rely on is a black box, like an autonomous agent which is hosted by company XYZ, and you pay some subscription, I think that's a big problem. Like for people, it might be a nice UX on day one, but like ultimately what you're doing is like you're creating like an even worse situation than with social media, where you're not just giving them the data, ultimately you're giving them everything, like your entire like sort of means of economic production, which you're creating there, right? Which you're outsourcing there.
It is a bit like the same problem we have, for example, with Google. So for example, like we search for things on Google, but like the way that results are ranked and everything is kind of a black box, like it's an algorithm. So
right,
you could believe that it is biased or like manipulated in multiple ways. And so people don't really think about it, but I think that could be the same issue with AI, basically.
Yeah, and so today, the way we think about it is like it's important to leverage like powerful technology and also be able to build towards like something which is end-to-end open. And for instance, we have a product called Governator. So what is the use case there? You have like effectively a set of autonomous agents arranged in what we call the autonomous service. So for simple purposes, the autonomous agent is actually the autonomous service. Under the hood, you have all these nodes. And this system, the governator, acts as some person, like a synthetic one where you delegate your tokens to, and then it will vote on your behalf. And so in order to do that, it needs to read proposals and interpret them and interpret preferences, which it has been delegated from its users. And so what actually happens under the hood is you have all these agents using these models. And now you could imagine that in the ideal state, all of them are really capable open source models. And increasingly that's possible. But actually, you don't even, for the system to work well and maintain its integrity, you don't necessarily need this, because the agents themselves will use different models by design and then pool their sort of observations from these models. So before they take action, they're actually aggregating information from different models. And that has its benefits, because models, even if you have, let's say, an open source model and you can look at everything, the weights, and you can sort of prompt it locally, there's still this issue that, obviously it could be biased. It could even be poisoned in a certain domain of the prompting space. And it's very hard to notice until you actually kind of compared it like for like with something else. And then even if everything's fine in that sense, like it's not biased, I mean, it's, according to some measure, let's say, and it doesn't have any obvious flaws, it could still be the problem that it hallucinates effectively a response. And so being able to not rely on a single model is actually a feature rather than a bug. I think even when everything is transparent and decentralized, it's unlikely to be a good idea in the foreseeable future to, let's say, just use one decentrally hosted open source model, because there could be issues with its inference. Like it could, have an issue in that part of latent space, or it could be like sort of hallucinating, whatever.
So would you describe Autonomous as like a decentralized network, including like AI that aggregates like the results of multiple models? I would say open models whenever you can, to like achieve bigger goals using like your own agent that aggregates everything? Like, is it a good way to say it, to explain it? Like, what would be for you like the 360 explanation of Autonomous? Because like we've mentioned like a lot of topics and a lot of things, and I don't want to lose people here, because like
right.
those are very complex like terms yes. And topics and everything. So how would you explain Autonomous like very quickly? And also, how would you explain the differences with like the projects that are available crypto wise?
Yeah. So increasingly, we think of Autonomous as effectively economy of autonomous agents, which we co-own as the members of the DAO. So there is an economy has many parts. There's those who build these agents. There's those who operate these agents. There's those who coordinate them or launch them, like the entrepreneurs of the economy. And then there's those who provide capital into the economy. And so actually the OLAS protocol has mechanisms for all these. If you go to the website today, there's like get involved section, and you'll see sort of mechanisms for each one of the constituents I just mentioned. So at a high level, really OLAS is about coordinating these different actors in the environment, in the OLAS ecosystem, to create more and more autonomous agent economies, which we can collectively co-own. Right. And so the biggest economy right now is this OLAS Predict economy, which has these 3 types of agents, and they're doing these hundreds of thousands of transactions, and they're very active every day. But increasingly, we see more and more like early economies emerging, and that's sort of the focus. So all these technicalities, which we mentioned before, are sort of ways of building these autonomous agent economies. Ultimately, it's about coordinating them. And I think that's what really kind of sets us apart from quite a few projects, and actually makes it also very hard to understand for initially. It's like we're not like creating this, one thing which you can, like this one network which you can prompt or call, or this one use case. It's like it's a substrate on which we create lots of different economies as a decentralized community. So some of the projects we are very excited about. We're excited about a lot of projects. So the great thing about autonomous agents is that ultimately they use a lot of different other technologies. So if you think about some of the things we mentioned before, what was around models. So you need to train models, and then you need to, make inference. Like you need to basically be able to call them for, let's say, providing them a prompt and getting your response. And there's, for instance, projects like Jensen, which isn't live yet, but they're like on testnet, which focuses really on training. Then there's like something like Bittensor, which is between training and inference. They have sort of different subnets which focus on different kind of features there. But then you also have things like, data storage in a decentralized way, right? So now your agents have done something, maybe they need to store data permanently. So you can think of things like Arweave or Ceramic or Filecoin, where you need to basically store that data and structure it in some way. Then you need RPCs, right? You basically need to talk to chains. Like the agents themselves don't run like nodes in these different chains, so they will want to connect to different RPCs. So agents, as a result, are like humans, like users of the entire decentralized technology stack. But unlike humans, like they never sleep, right? And they're configurable to be as active as you want them to be. And that's very exciting. Like that's why, like with the OLA's predict economy, it almost has like dials. You can almost say sort of, let's dial it more up and basically grow it more. And so it really becomes an economy where you can sort of like in your standard real world economy, where you can sort of dial like growth in by setting certain parameters in the economy. It's like a bit similar in agent economies, and that's why we're very excited at OLA. So we see them like as power users of really this entire decentralized AI and blockchain stack.
I do believe that people can make like a big difference between like autonomous and like infrastructure solution, including like RPC solution provider, or like storage solution providers. But could you maybe get more into details when it comes to the difference between like autonomous and Fetch.ai, autonomous and Bittensor, like autonomous and Ocean protocol, those kind of solutions? Because like sometimes like I could say that like all the technical words used on those sites, like I don't know if they are like technical to lose people's minds and make sure it is not easily understandable, or if it is about marketing or everything. But most of the time that is quite hard for anyone to understand, like what are like the different types of like value propositions and the differences. So could you get more into it? I think that could really help like the audience watching us.
So I think let's start with Bittensor. So Bittensor allows communities to create networks on which they train or provide models for inference. And there's a whole incentive mechanism for these sort of miners and validators to come together. And then the idea is that sort of there's sort of client software, be it humans, be it, via some browser or something, or be it or some application, or be it autonomous agents or other kind of autonomous systems to use these outputs, like be it like inference outputs, or participate in these networks in some way. I think they do extremely well at like creating a growing community, and it's actually very exciting to see what's going on in this community. And then you have like things like Fetch.ai. I think Fetch.ai, obviously I used to work there, is very like historically has their own chain as well. I think in the Bittensor sense, like what's interesting there is that the chain itself is really rather dumb, and that's a feature. Like the chain basically doesn't do much. It just kind of directs these incentives to all these things which are happening off chain. And that has its own challenges around making sure that the incentives mechanism actually work, and that there's actually like meaningful like outputs there. But it keeps the chain itself sort of rather minimalistic. And then there's the token which sort of incentivizes all these models. In the Fetch.ai example, you have this kind of chain, and when I joined there, I think they were very visionary about like having autonomous agents and chains and so on. They were, I think, the first project who was sort of talking about this. But one big issue is once you create your chain, where the chain is sort of a smart contract chain and sort of needs its own users, is that you basically have to get all these users, right? Like it suddenly all becomes about making this L1 meaningful effectively. And that can become a major distraction. So I always felt that when I was there, and even now when I look at it, it feels like a distraction. Like either you're building autonomous agents and then they can really use any chain, and then you need to embrace that. And that's exactly what OLAS does.
Or you build a layer one.
Or you build a layer one. But if you do both, it becomes in its way, because now you kind of, you're cannibalizing each other's effort. So OLAS doesn't have a chain. And OLAS is deployed now on 8 chains, and it's growing, right? Like
it is agnostic.
Exactly. Yeah. We just bring the features of the autonomous agent economies which we're creating with partners to those chains. And so then like no such chain loves us, for instance, because we're generating a lot of like transactions and engagement with the chain via these synthetic users. So increasingly the way we're thinking about OLAs is that from a perspective of like protocols and chains, we are daily active users. We're offering daily active users these synthetic autonomous agents. And then like, for instance, Ocean you brought up, is very focused on data, right? So it's like orthogonal in a sense. Like autonomous agents on OLAs can very much engage with the Ocean protocol or some other kind of data marketplace. I see that as very complementary.
What did you learn from like Fetch.ai whenever you were working there? Like what were the biggest, like I would say, lessons in a way? Like what did you learn from it, and why did you decide to move away from Fetch.ai to create Valerie and to work and contribute to Autonolas, basically?
Yeah. So one big lesson was what I mentioned. Is like building a chain and autonomous agent gets in each other's way, because an autonomous agent cannot fully run on the chain. If that was so, if it's just a set of smart contracts, then by definition, this means something needs to call it repeatedly to actually get stuff done, right? Because smart contract can't schedule to call itself.
It would be very expensive, and that is not meant to do it, right? I guess.
Like you can't build a public blockchain that way, because you basically could imagine, like, let's imagine for a second you do, then in block 10, everyone schedules to call block 11. Now block 11 is already out of gas and can never be built, right? And so that's the end of it. And so basically you can now build some contraptions around it where you limit this and so on and so forth. But ultimately you're always in a situation where ultimately this set of smart contracts on the chain would never be fully autonomous, in the sense that it would never fully have control over its own actions, right? It might be that it's just preempted because there's no time to run it. Now that's one issue, like chain and agents. And then once you think about agents and decide to just build agent, then the next problem you have, and a lot of Web2 companies have this, is very quickly you run into the situation where you're effectively building a hosting platform for centralized software, right? So you might have some marketing around it that it not actually is sort of centralized, but ultimately, like, it tends to happen. And I'm, looking at Fetch in particular, this is also what's happening there. Like, as far as I understand, the current text ends up very sort of a hosted solution, basically, where I can go to some website and I can click around and there might be some nice UX in it, but ultimately as a user, I don't own this thing. It's just someone's software and I can engage with it. And that has its, purpose. I mean, the Web2 is a big space and has obviously its purpose, but we're just shifting the problem we're solving, right?
But it's not the original philosophy, you would say. Like, this is not what you were wanted to build, like, at the very start.
Correct. And I don't think it solves our biggest problem, which is ultimately, as these autonomous agent systems go beyond something I click around on a website and actually become powerful, like autonomous synthetic beings, then it really becomes a big question. Like, how do we own them? How do we co-own them? How do we ensure that, like, everyone can have an agent? It's not good if just like the very well off have powerful agents and everyone else becomes sort of totally reliant on these people and their agents. So that's what I was always worried about. It's like, okay, if you build just open source, then like, how does the funding model work, right? Ultimately, someone needs to fund all these endeavors. And if you build like a decentralized network or decentralized solution in name only, you're not solving the problem. And so the way OLAS does this is by basically having shifted the focus from basically trying to capture value as a network from an individual agent to trying to capture value from these agent economies, right? And that is actually, like, in OLAS Predict, working. So the agent economy, you have this internal demand flywheel where effectively some agent coming live creates more demand for other agents coming live. And then OLAS kind of coordinates this whole system. So suddenly you actually have a meaningful, like, decentralized protocol where everyone can fully own their agents and still you have like a working economy.
Do you leverage like the other decentralized solutions available? So for example, does like the autonomous agents from like OLAS are using Bittensor, like some, I would say, some subnets or some solutions of Bittensor, or is it like too early to do that? Or you're not like, okay, with the results and performance they provide, like like, yeah, how do you collaborate with like the other projects in town, and are they mature enough to include them in those like autonomous agents like thinking process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we collaborate with a whole bunch of protocols. So most notably, we work a lot with the Gnosis AI team, which they're now building up. We work a lot with Nevermind, who are actually like a core part to the Ola stack increasingly. So they provide these sort of AI payment solutions. So some of our agents use them for like AI subscription systems. We work a lot with the Napta AI team. They were previously called Algorera, a smaller startup. They work, in the intersection of AI and crypto, particularly on AI side. They work a lot on our improvement of the Ola's predict system. We work with Polyrap, who are building other types of agents and contributing agents to the ecosystem. So they're some of the sort of partners who are much more directly involved. Then we have a lot of integrations, which are some of them under development, some of them live. So coming back to Bittensor, we looked into kind of incorporating that into Ola's Predict. At the time when we did that in October, it wasn't like performant relative to the alternatives we had. But yeah, we're looking constantly at these solutions, actually working with teams to bring more integration. So certainly like in the medium term, like for sure we'll be fully integrated. I think there's always like sequencing as well as to where you currently put your effort. Yeah.
And use case wise, I mean, that is what I'm like the most excited about and the most interested about. Like, what are like the biggest use cases like you're seeing and that makes sense to you? I think you mentioned like market predictions, like basically being able to have like a priority about like an event occurring, or at least like the priority of like, I don't know, the price going up, price going down, or like, I don't know, like a physical event happening. Like, except that, like, what are the other use cases that would make a lot of sense, and also, in your opinion, would attract more attention around like autonomous, for example?
Yeah. So we have the ambition to allow everyone to run their own agent. And so on the operator side, like I want my mom to be able to run an agent. And so there's a lot of like Valerie employees who are working on simply making running an agent as simple as it can be. Like currently you still need to be not a developer, but someone who can install software. Soon that will go away. I can't say exactly how, but like it will go away. On the
Any timeline on that?
Less than 2 months. Yeah.
Okay.
On the developer side, we're very focused currently on getting the developer experience. Like, I'm going through the user classes. So we have like those kind of ecosystem users, and I'll come to the end users at the end. But on the developer side, we have one big pain point, which is around like speed of development. And it's just like way too high still. And so we basically have this internal goal at Valerie that like some reference benchmark, which like some reference implementation, which took us around 2 weeks to build at the beginning of the year, should take 1 day at the end of the year. And the way we do this is with generative AI as well. So we have now agents internally which build other agents.
AI everywhere.
Yes. So, but like agents building agents is basically the way we approach that. And
that would be crazy.
Yes.
I mean, this is like, yeah, this is crazy.
I mean, we have some internal, really exciting prototypes, and then like over the next 6 months in stages, we'll roll out different features thereof for the community.
To make it simple, like so, basically, you have agents or AI like writing code for you to implement things faster. To at the end of the day, create like AI agents, so another sort of AI. So AI creating AI to make things faster in a way.
So a developer, the ambition is that a developer who, in our case, knows Python at the moment, can go from an idea, i.e. a prompt, to a running agent within a day, right? Right now, by the end of the year. Right now, it's 2 weeks. Or not 2 weeks anymore. There was 2 weeks at the beginning of the year. So that's on the dev side. Then in terms of the launchers, what we found is that we're very impressed by the community growth in Bittensor ecosystem. And one of those things is because of the way the emissions work and the way it allows bootstrapping of new kinds of use cases. We have now this Ola staking, which is coming live hopefully at some point in May. It's currently under development. We published the website and everything. It's already passed our approval. And what this will bring is this kind of emission system for staking, which is fully integrated with the protocol. So we're very excited because this will really enable for the ecosystem to kind of permissionlessly create more agent economies via these emissions as well. And now coming to the end users, I think this year, like obviously long year ahead still, don't have full visibility, but I would certainly think that the OLAS Predict use case, which we have, is still like very early. Like we think there's like several orders of magnitudes in there to grow that. And actually predictions is like such a core input for other agents because, you know, you might think of predictions, as you were saying, like price or sports betting or something like that. But like here we're often talking about like very like small scale events, which just matter for a few agents. And you can imagine that an agent system which based on prediction markets as an input rather than its own predictions by using its own model can be much more reliable. So almost like prediction market sits at the top for a lot of other agent use cases. Now, prediction markets itself has a feature whereby you want like almost these kind of researchers agents, and researcher agents are something which a lot of other projects need as well. One great example is Creator Bits. So they're actually a new protocol which is starting to build entirely on the OLAS stack. What they're creating is these kind of agents that effectively are influencers. So you can own your own autonomous agent influencer. And you can imagine that an influencer, you know, needs to have access to current information, but it also needs to have access to like very, like, be able to retrieve like very specific information on its domain. And if every time it had to do that, it first had to research, it's very inefficient. So again, here you have an opportunity to create an economy where you have like these influencer agents becoming like almost the demand side for these kind of researcher agents, right? Who are like researching specific information, and the OLAS Predict also becoming a demand side for these researcher agents. So this is how we look at a lot of the use cases. It's like about how do we create internal demand flywheels between these early use cases. And so that way we're kind of working ourselves forward to like really powerful sort of outcomes generator for end users. I think in terms of like, there's a couple of other projects who are doing fantastic work. They're much more focused on this interactive paradigm where they kind of use like, little chatbots or little kind of game experiences for end users. We're currently not directly engaging in these kind of use cases because we really want to create these kind of outcomes generators, which can then be kind of plugged into all these other use cases. So gaming is like a big final area I want to mention. Like we have one project called Virtual. They announced that they're building with the OLAS stack as well. And what they're doing is they kind of have these non-player characters, which are built sort of as autonomous agents. And you can imagine that we had a Twitter Spaces the other week. They were talking about it. There's also NIM, the chain which currently recently launched and did an airdrop on the OLAS ecosystem. They're also building in this domain. Both of them were talking about like how that kind of really changes the game dynamics because you effectively now have like games which sort of evolve whilst you're gone and things like that, right? Like very interesting.
Yeah, being a player of Red Dead Redemption 2 helps me to see like how it could be and how the games could be better with like better NPCs basically. I wanted to have your perspectives on like the strength and the weaknesses of like autonomous. Like what are the biggest strengths of autonomous? What are the biggest weakness of autonomous in your opinion to be 100% transparent? I guess that the weaknesses can be fixed and topics you're working on very heavily. But yeah, what are your opinion on weaknesses and strengths of autonomous so far?
Yeah, so let's start with the strengths. It's like about creating these economies with the internal demand flywheels. That's very important because, users can come from a lot of domains. We're really focused on synthetic users. We really embrace that. And actually it's bearing fruit in terms of, because it creates all this sort of demand downstream, like for the developers, for the operators, for the protocol itself. And in terms of weaknesses, like in order to go much faster, we need more developers. And the unfortunate reality is that at this crypto AI intersection, the crypto part is very small, right? The AI part in theory is very large, but actually there's not many AI people who are willing to currently sit in this crypto AI intersection. And so growing that pie, having like way more really capable developers in this space, will accelerate things a lot. So we're very focused on like solving problems around developer adoption, and, making developers move faster. So the one example I mentioned before, another is the Academy. So if any of the listeners are interested in building autonomous agent, we have like very regular, these OLA's Dev Academies, which Valerie is putting together. It's, a very like nice and guided tour around what autonomous agents even are, like going into more details than what we covered today, but also like then helping you build your own autonomous agents for whatever use case you want. And we just like added even more team to the OLA's Dev Academy, so it's getting even better. So it's perfect time to join.
Cette vidéo vous est présentée en partenariat avec dYdX. dYdX est LA solution décentralisée qui vous permet de trader les principales crypto-monnaies de manière liquide sur mobile et ordinateur. Contrairement à la majorité des exchanges, vous n'avez pas besoin de vous KYC et vous récupérez la majorité des frais que vous payez. Plus de 60 000 personnes utilisent déjà dYdX et j'en fais partie, alors qu'attendez-vous? Scannez le QR code sur votre écran ou utilisez le lien dans la description pour créer votre compte avec un simple wallet et profitez de 5% de réduction sur vos frais. Allez, on repart sur l'interview.
I wanted to have your opinion on like a few topics. I think that are related to competitors, or at least like your working field. So basically 1 hour ago, we had a news related to Fetch. It was Fetch, Singularity, and Ocean, I believe, that were thinking about merging all together. So at least merging their token, probably merging their team, I guess. I don't know. Like, are you surprised of this kind of news, and how will it affect the industry, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. Couple of reasons. Obviously, I didn't expect it. So from that pure kind of factor. Also, in the past, has any merger worked in crypto? I mean, the last one which I remember is like Faye and what was it? Tribe? Then no, Tribe.
I think we haven't seen like a lot of merge so far.
Rari and Faye, or Rari and Tribe, or whatever. That did not go well at all. And then there was one. Well, Matic historically, right? Matic and Polygon, that arguably worked well. I don't know. It's hard to pull off. And then more generally, I'm surprised because they're doing obviously tangential, but not the same things. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have opted for it.
What are the reasons behind this decision, in your opinion? Like, what are the motivations of those projects, in your opinion? Like from like a outsider, or like I would say external perspective?
I have no idea. I mean,
okay. I mean, it's fine. It's like just like speculating on it. I mean, but since you're like very knowledgeable about the industry, that's why I thought it might be interesting for the people.
Oh, right. I mean, they're obviously all 3 projects which have been going on for a long time. And I think one thing, without, being unfair to them, which is fair to say, it's like there's this obvious question whether there is something there. Because if you've been going for like 5 years, whatever, in most of their cases, I don't know exact numbers, even more. And yeah, there's a lot of marketing, but is there all too much usage? That always raises obvious questions. And now you have like, in terms of market cap, if you look at Bittensor, they're clearly currently the winner in the AI crypto intersection. And it's just, a massive, like ecosystem in terms of developer. I mean, you just go in the Discord, it's very rich. Now, is it a perfect project? Nothing's perfect, right? So there's a lot of room for errors there, and a lot of problems there, and a lot of things to improve. Then you look at things like Near, like we have a relationship to them as well. Like they obviously historically didn't talk too much about AI. They always talked about a lot of other things. But then Ilya is like, one of the co-authors of the Transformers paper, and clearly knows what he's doing. So, and then there's a whole bunch of like really, really serious projects now who like really know what they're doing. I mean, we connected to quite a few of them. I think it's a very interesting time, because like crypto and AI now seeing finally this emergence of like really significant protocols, and all 3 of the ones you mentioned are first movers, and maybe a bit worried about like their status in this increasing competitive landscape.
What are your views and opinions on like the market valuations of like OpenAI, for example, like all those big names like in crypto and outside of crypto? Is it something like you care about, or like you get any interest in, or like, yeah, because like that is getting crazy, to be honest. Like the OpenAI case is kind of crazy. I do believe that OpenAI will change like the society and the impact AI has like on society for a long time, and that it brings a lot of value. So the valuation is big, but like, do you have any concerns about it? Like, how do you see it? Do you really care? Like, or is it something you're not thinking about?
I think occasionally about it. I'm never faced by market valuations to the extent that they're not like, obviously harming a project to be able to execute. I think it's very important to focus on executing and bringing value to end users and stakeholders. And in terms of OpenAI, I think like the way people talk about it and the way I understand it is that they are very convinced that there's some form of AGI they can attain, which will allow them to become like a bit of a which will catapult them into a bit of a winner takes all scenario. And that is why I think they are aiming to raise the sums of money they want to raise. Ultimately, this is an obvious conflict of a couple of things they're also saying, which is around like it will be just available for everyone and so on. I think that intention...
that's bullshit.
Right. I mean, that intention is, perhaps there. I mean, I don't want to totally, say that they're like not having, but the problem is we notice, even with the best intention, if the structure isn't there, people get corrupted, everyone. Right. And so like ultimately you cannot build an entity which ultimately controls like entire like GDP size economies worth of wealth, potentially more, and tell me that you're going to like just sort of govern that well when we just seen like I mean, we've seen in November they can't even govern like the most basic setup, right? Like it's a shit show, and it still is. I mean, they shuffled a bunch of seats, so this is not the way to govern this. The only way to govern this is with decentralized networks where there's huge ownership. So yeah, I mean, it's very worrying. That's why I think the decentralized AI space, all the serious actors there are actually very like concerned around not like this kind of dumb, like the AI is going to kill us all. I mean, that should be discussed somewhere, and like there's certain concerns there, but like the ultimate concern is like creating like this extreme economic inequality, and like really extreme, like, Hunger Games 10x or something. I don't know, like some really retarded outcome where basically we are all like totally unable to function without like the approval of some overlords, and that we need to fight. That's why we need to build like decentralized networks where we can co-own powerful like economic factors and share them.
Who are the biggest challengers like to OpenAI in your opinion, and are they open sourced? I mean, I heard like a few companies and few solutions were open sourced and were getting like a lot of tractions and good results. I'm thinking about Mistral. I'm thinking about Hugging Face. I think there are like a couple of other solutions. I think also Facebook published like an open source model, which goes like into your philosophy and vision of like AI, I guess. So yeah, who are the biggest challenger, and who do you believe in except autonomous?
I always believe in competition. So I think generally we want to strive for a market environment which is competitive, because that constrains a lot of problems. I mean, it doesn't mean it's perfect as a result. You can still have problems, but that's sort of very important. So the more the more big players we can have who are competing both in the closed and open space is important. So naturally that's now happening also from a national level, because you have these concerns obviously of like states to be able to retain their ability to even function when like some other state has like a much more capable AI system. So I think it's important to, whilst one cares about open forms of AI and decentralized AI, that one also funds serious competitors to like OpenAI to create like a competitive environment. Then in terms of like, so the core problem, as far as I understand, at the moment with like competing vis-a-vis someone like OpenAI, is that you ultimately, like the way training works, it just implicitly assumes that you co-locate these things quite a lot. And even if you don't like fully co-locate them, I think even OpenAI now, because it's just so large, the training centers, that they like the training infrastructure they're required, that they actually have to physically distribute it across like different geographical areas in order to get access to enough electricity. Even then, still they need to create like these custom like links between the data centers to be able to ship the data between them at a very high speed. So like we're talking like hundreds of gigabit per second. And the issue now is that obviously it's very unclear like how a decentralized network could like ever compete on that metric, right? But then if you listen to someone like Jan LeCun and others, there's still like this other thing that, like, there's these scaling laws which speak for LLMs. So like large language models have these scaling laws, and then you can kind of predict like how much better they get from that by just like kind of throwing more training at it and more data. But basically, but then there's simple observations like things like, okay, well, a human doesn't need that. And like, then we have like, much less, like according to some metrics, like, we have a much more efficient architecture for sure, right? And so the question is like, can we, maybe there's more efficient architecture just over here, and maybe the training of them and like the way they function looks very different. So I think like one can very like easily forget that there's these entire design spaces which are being explored, which could leapfrog that design space eventually. And then again, everything could look very different in terms of like what the competitive architecture looks like, how it's trained and so on. So I wouldn't like write it off. And then like finally, I think a lot of the, coming back to Mistral and so on, like it seems like increasingly a lot of the good enough models can be run on the edge, like, or locally. So you can build very powerful use cases with these kind of models, and you don't even need like the closed source models from OpenAI or Claude. And I think that is very likely that we will see like this very long tail. And the question is a bit like, how the weighting is there. Will there be just a couple of use cases which can only be done in these centralized settings, or how will that look? Ultimately, my sense, but I can't prove it to you, but my sense is that AI-based economies will have a very competitive environment as well, like human-based. Like they'll just be supercharged economic actors, like with smarter brains and faster and so on. But ultimately, there be a lot of competition and lots of specialization. So that's why OLAS like focuses on agent economies, because we think there will be agent economies. We're pretty sure there won't just be like one model which rules us all.
Could you define AGI, and like, is it something that we'll see during our life? Like how soon could we see like AGI? Like, is it like only like humans' desires and greed and everything, or is it about to become real very, very quickly? So maybe could you explain the basic concepts and like is it real, like, and how fast it could be real, basically?
Yeah, I'm very bad at providing a timeline on that. I'm really not the right person to ask. I think the way it's currently defined is that you effectively have like an artificial intelligence system which is as capable as a human across many domains, if not all, rather than specific domains. So, we already have like systems which are much, much better than humans on like narrow levels of intelligence. But then that same system couldn't maybe, do this other task at all. And the human can obviously do a lot of different tasks quite well. So once we have that, then this definition of AGI would be met. Now, it seems like, from my understanding, but again, like I don't want to exert my, I don't want to pretend to know more than I do. And from my understanding, it will almost certainly be some form of multi-agent system. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, that it can't be sort of deployed in one like kind of location. And so from the end user, it kind of feels like a unified system, but like on the architecture level, it probably will look like that. And that would again favor like kind of what we're doing at Autonomous in the end. Like, I mean, I don't know, how it will all play out. We could get into another winter. It could all accelerate very fast. And still, I do really think that specialization in AI systems will be a thing. Like we have it in human economies, we'll have it in AI economies. And so in that view, I'm certainly not alone. Like a lot of experts who are much more in that field kind of have confirmed my intuition there. Time will tell. And timelines, actually, I mean, I have no idea. It could be, you know, some people saying a year or two, some people say 5 years, which they always say, and then some people say 50.
Just like people say Bitcoin will go to 1 million and people tell us it will go to 0. So yeah, quite hard to predict.
I mean, one thing I'll say though is like, for instance, self-driving cars, there was always this concern from some, I never had this concern, but from some that there would never be a thing, right? And they're now like really, really are things. So I sat in a Waymo the other day in San Francisco, and you know, you click the app like an Uber, you click the app, comes, picks you up, tries to do some point. There's no human involved, right? So that, like people were saying in 2010 or something, like that will be 2 years away, right? Elon Musk, and then like it definitely took longer, but it happened. So I suspect we'll eventually have it with software too. General intelligence too.
I think I took like a lot of your time, and I have like a lot more topics to chat about with you. But I'll keep it here. So just to conclude this interview, so do you have any persons you would like suggest to invite on this podcast? And also, aside of it, last question, what are the things that gets you the most excited outside of autonomous?
Yeah, what gets me excited is creating communities of people who build open decentralized infrastructure, in particular in AI. And so I'm very excited about outside of autonomous, like the projects which achieve that. So, you know, as I mentioned before, I think Bittensor having that community of builders is really something we aspire to as well, and learn from them there. And then outside of crypto entirely, I think like LangChain, AutoGPT managed to do quite well on the agent side there, where communities of developers created interesting use cases together. In terms of like invitations, I think it'd be great to invite people who are somewhat skeptical of the crypto aspect, but can see its relevance. That would be one angle. Another great person would be Emad from Stability AI. He just recently announced that he's building decentralized AI as well. So yeah, I think he'd be great.
I was working in an AI company like in 2017 for like 2.5 years. So basically the name of the company was and still is like Penascore, which aggregates like video feeds from like esports matches. And so from the video feed, it kind of gets like thousands of data points to create statistics. And then after that, odds and live odds during the matches. And so I met like brilliant people in this company. So I'll try to get like Web2 data scientists and data engineers like for an interview. I've been negotiating. It's been hard because most of them like crypto, but some of them don't like it. So I'll see what I can do. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, David.